Everyone was shocked by the guest at Curly Howard's wake. More than anything else, Curly Howard is known for being a part of the Three Stooges, an American slapstick comedy group with his older brothers Moe and Shemp Howard and actor Larry Fine. Many people think that Curly is the most well-known and liked of the Three Stooges. He was known for his interesting physical comedy, improvisations, and athleticism, as well as his high-pitched voice and vocal expressions. This video will show you the shocking person who showed up at Curly Howard's funeral and made everyone go crazy. Find out who this guest was by watching this movie all the way through. Curly Howard was born Jerome Lester Horwitz in the Bensonhurst neighborhood of Brooklyn. He was the fifth child of Jenny and Solomon Horwitz and the youngest of their 5 kids. They teased him by calling him Babe because he was the youngest. But when his older brother Shemp Howard married Gertrude Frank, he was also called Babe. He kept the name Babe all his life. To keep things clear, his brothers called him Curly. The quiet Howard rarely made things hard for his parents. He wasn't very good at school, but he was great on the school basketball team. He didn't finish high school. Instead, he did odd jobs and followed his bigger brothers around all the time, because he looked up to them. He was also good at singing and ballroom dancing. He often went to the Triangle Ballroom in Brooklyn, where he sometimes ran into George Raft. Howard accidentally shot himself in the left ankle when he was 12 years old while cleaning a gun. Even though Moe rushed him to the hospital and saved his life, the cut caused a noticeable limp. Because Curly was afraid of surgery, he never had his limp fixed. Because he had a limp, he learned how to walk funny while he was with the Three Stooges. There was more than one child who had an accident besides Curly. Larry got a chemical burn on his arm when he was 4 years old and oxalic acid fell on him in his dad's jewelry store. The acid burned through the skin and showed his muscles. Doctors told him to take up fighting to strengthen the damaged tissues after getting a skin graft, but his mother convinced him to take up the violin instead. He later learned to play music very well, and when he was 9, he played for the Philadelphia Orchestra. Moe Howard's famous bowl cut came about because he was rebellious as a child. When Howard was a boy, his mom wouldn't cut his hair short, so it was always shoulder length. This made him a target for teasing at school. He said, "I used to fight my way to school, in school, and on the way home from school on the Mike Douglas show." Moe stole some scissors and cut his hair in the shed in his garden, because he was sick of being picked on all the time. Curly liked music and funny things as well. He saw Ted Healy's vaudeville act and saw his brothers Shemp and Moe play the Three Stooges. He also liked to hang out behind the scenes, even though he never did any of the moves. Howard got married to Julia Rosenthal for the first time on August 5, 1930, but the marriage was quickly dissolved. Howard's first job on stage was as a circus director for the Oroville Nat Band in 1928. Moe later remembered that his shows were often better than the band's. He liked the job, but he saw his brothers Moe and Shemp, along with their partner Larry Fine, become famous as some of the Ted Healy Stooges. A big hit for vaudeville star Healy was when his Stooges would walk on stage and interrupt or heckle him while he tried to sing or tell jokes. This made the crowd angry and upset. In the meantime, Healy and his friends were in Rube Goldberg's Soup to Nuts, their first full-length movie, which came out in 1930. He was offered a job at the Vitaphone Studios in Brooklyn in 1932. Since Shemp wasn't there, Moe suggested that Curly play the third Stooge. But Healy thought that Curly looked too good for the part with his thick chestnut hair and stylishly waxed beard. Howard left the room and came back a few minutes later with a clean shave. Howard was a big hit with crowds, especially kids, because he behaved like a child and was naturally funny. He was caught in the act. He was known for having an unbreakable head that broke anything that tried to hurt it, even saws. This led to his famous joke, "Oh, look, even though he hadn't taken acting classes, he was very good at being funny." By the time the Three Stooges were at the top of their game in the late 1930s, Howard's comedic performances were almost a part of their movies. He was great at making food, tools, pipes, and other inanimate objects into funny props. Here are some examples of plumbing. We will go 1940, we want our mummy 1938, an ache in every steak 1941, Cactus Makes Perfect 1942, and their most violent short, They Stooged to Conga 1943. Howard's energy started to fade in 1944. The Curly in movies like Idle Rumors 1944 and Booby Dupes 1945 had a deeper voice and moved more slowly. Between Making Idiots Deluxe in October 1944 and If a Body Meets a Body Meets a Body in March 1945, he may have had the first of many strokes. After making the full-length movie Rockin' in the Rockies, he finally went to Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, California on January 23, 1945, and was told she had extreme high blood pressure, an eye hemorrhage, and was overweight. Because he was sick, he had to rest, so only 5 short films came out in 1945. Moe Howard begged Harry Cohen to give his younger brother some time off when he got out of the army to get stronger, But Cohen wouldn't stop making his popular Stooge shorts, and he simply turned down his request. From August 1945 to January 1946, the Stooges were not busy. That's when they booked a 2-month live show contract in New York City, where they played shows 7 days a week. Howard met his third wife, Marion Buxbaum, while they were on the East Coast. They got married on October 17, 1945, after dating for 2 weeks. Howard was not even close to the same person he used to be when he finally got back to Los Angeles at the end of November 1945. When the crew got back to Columbia at the end of January 1946, they had been off for 2 months. However, they only worked 24 days between the beginning of February and the middle of May. Howard's health kept getting worse during that 8-week break, even though he wasn't working. Howard's voice was even rougher than it had been before by the beginning of 1946. It was getting harder and harder for him to remember even the easiest dialogue. A lot of weight had been lost and lines had formed on his face. Howard's last performance as a real Stooge was in Half-Wit's Holiday, which came out in 1947. He had a severe stroke while waiting to film the last scene of the day on May 6, 1946, while sat in director Jules White's chair. He didn't answer when the assistant director told him to go on stage. The co-star Mo found had his head on his lap and wasn't moving, but he could hear a few faint cries. Howard could meet and marry Valerie Newman on July 31, 1947, even though he wasn't fully better from his stroke yet. Someone Curly knew, Irma Levitan, told her that Valerie was the only good thing that came to mind after some time had passed, and the only person who really cared about him. Even though his health kept getting worse after they got married, Valerie had a daughter named Janie in 1948. Later that same year, Howard had a second major stroke that left him partly paralyzed. Between 1950 and 1955, he used a wheelchair and ate boiled rice and apples to lose weight. He was taken in by Valerie to the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital on August 29, 1950. In January 1946, Shemp was hired to stand in for the officer who was supposed to arrest Curly while he was performing live in New Orleans. After Curly had a stroke, Shemp agreed to take over as Columbia short singer until his younger brother was well enough to return. The four Stooges all signed a copy of their 1947 Columbia Pictures contract, which says that Shemp's joining would only be temporary until Curly got better enough to go back to work full-time. Howard partly got better, and in January 1947, when his hair had grown back, he made a short cameo in the third movie after Brother Shemp's return, Hold That Lion, 1947, as a train traveler barking in his sleep. In this movie, Larry Fine played all three Howard brothers at the same time: Mo, Shemp, and Curly. Later, director White said that he put together the scene on the spot when Curly showed up at the set without planning to. It was a thought that came to mind at the last minute. Curly stopped by the set. It had been a while since his stroke. I didn't see a nurse with him, so it looks like he came in by himself. He was just relaxing and reading the paper. When I walked in, he put down the newspaper he was reading and waved at me.he agreed to act in the picture because I thought it would be funny. Howard made a second cameo in June 1948 as a mad chef for the 1949 short film Malice in the Palace. But because he was sick, his performance wasn't good enough, so his parts were cut. He is shown with the other Stooges on the title card for the short, but he never showed up in the actual film. After a few months of care and tests at the hospital, Curly was let go, but he would come back from time to time until he died. He was moved to a care home in February 1951. A month later, he had another stroke there. He moved in with the North Hollywood Hospital and Sanitarium in April. The boss of the facility told the Howard family in December 1951 that Curly's mental decline was making it hard for the nurses to do their jobs. His family knew they could no longer take care of him and asked that he be sent to a mental health center. Mo didn't do what he said, so he sent him to the Baldy View Sanitarium in San Gabriel, California. Howard was married 4 times and had 2 children. Howard's first marriage ended in divorce 5 months after they got married and before he became famous with the Three Stooges. Howard married Elaine Ackerman, his second wife, on June 7, 1937. After they got married, they had a daughter named Marilyn the next year. After they got split in June 1940, he put on weight and got high blood pressure. He felt bad about shaving his head because he thought it made him less attractive to women. He drank too much and slept too much to deal with his feelings of weakness. To show that he was a man, he started wearing hats in public and said that shaving his head made him feel like a child. Even though he didn't think much of himself, women liked him, especially those who wanted to use him. During World War II, the 3 actors didn't have to film for 7 months a year, which let them make personal visits. The Stooges were always putting on shows for service members, and Howard's health got worse because of all the work. He didn't drink when he was in movies or on stage. Mo wouldn't let it happen. But after work, he would go to nightclubs and eat, drink, and get sexually excited too much to deal with the stress of work. When it came to wine, food, women, and homes, he spent a lot of money and he was often close to going bankrupt. Moe was finally able to help him manage his money and even fill out his tax forms. Howard's dogs were always there for him, and they often made friends with strays wherever they went. He picked up lost dogs and took them from town to town on his tour until he found them a home somewhere else. When he wasn't acting, he often came home to find a few dogs waiting for him. Marion Buxbaum was the one person who no one thought would be at Curly Howard's funeral. It was Moe's hope that by telling Curly to find a wife, his brother would finally settle down and his health would get better. They were together for 2 weeks before he married Marion Buxbaum on October 17, 1945. They were married for 9 months. It got too hard for Curly to handle his lifestyle in 1945, and he was doing worse on set. Moe made him go to the hospital, where among other things, he was told he had high blood pressure and was overweight. Moe thought Curly was getting worse because he was lonely without Elaine after his divorce, so he put Curly in touch with a relative of the theater manager. Her name was Marion Buxbaum, and Curly liked her right away. They got married on October 17, 1945, even though they had only been dating for 2 weeks. He became Marion's stepfather right away to her 10-year-old son from a previous marriage. The painful divorce process was made worse by sensationalized and exploitative news stories that made his already weak health even worse. After the split, his health quickly and severely got worse. He had a stroke in July 1946, 2 months after the divorce was completed. The stroke ended his career. The wedding took place on July 31, 1947. Janie, their daughter, was born in 1948, and they stayed married until he died. Curly Howard was the Stooges member who died the youngest. He was only 48 years old. Curly Howard had 2 strokes that made his life even worse. He had eye hemorrhages, depression, pain, and other problems. He had a Jewish funeral and was buried at home of Peace Cemetery in East Los Angeles in the Western Jewish Institute Park. Ben and Shemp, his older brothers who died 3 years later, and his parents Jenny and Solomon are also buried there. He hadn't had a good life. Valerie Newman was the only person who ever treated Curly with kindness and comfort, and she was the only one who really cared about him. Fans will always remember Curly Howard, and it will make them cry to think about him. A lot of fans and reviewers agree that Curly Howard is their favorite Three Stooges member. I thought Curly was the greatest because he was a natural comedian who had no formal training, Larry Fine said in an interview in 1972. No matter what he did, he made it up on the spot. We were hurt when we lost Curly, end quote. A lot of people in the United States know Curly's mannerisms, attitude, and catchphrases, like "nyak nyak, whoop whoop," and Sweetly Steve Allen said he was one of the most original and little-known comic minds. The lives of the Three Stooges weren't all fun and games, despite what most people think. Health scares, shady management, and limits on how funny they could be were just some of the things that the trio had to deal with during their work. The Three Stooges became well known during the Great Depression, which is thought to have been one of the worst times in U.S. history. In an effort to make things less serious, the trio's slapstick comedy made fun of the elite, which had been made more glamorous in movies. The Three Stooges' funny pranks taught people how to laugh in the face of trouble by putting themselves in the shoes of regular people and his problems. As the years went by, they started to think that people didn't like their jokes. The Three Stooges gave up on their dream of getting a star on the famous Sunset Strip. Larry and Curly's deaths were the last straw for the trio. In 1983, they finally got where they belonged on 1560 Vine Street. Making a movie tribute to the Three Stooges was hard because directors had doubts and casting went wrong a lot of the time. Mel Brooks gave up on his plans to make a movie with himself, Dom DeLuise, and Marty Feldman as the likable trio in 1976. In 2005, Mel Gibson made a biographical film for TV that showed the private and sometimes painful lives of the stars. It made people cry in their seats instead of laughing out loud. Along with the other two, Curly quickly became the crowd's favorite by getting in on every joke. But this likable stooge hid a lot of insecurities like a strong need for companionship and an addiction to food and drink. Curly Howard quickly made a name for himself in the comedy business. Fans and the rest of the Three Stooges will always remember him. That's all for today. Thanks for seeing. We'll see you next time.